Okay. Welcome, everyone. My name is Grace Chimene, and I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Texas, and I will be the host for today's webinar. The League is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. We never support or oppose political parties or political candidates. Our mission is empowering voters and defending democracy. We know that this is a critical election and normal election processes are likely to be disrupted by the pandemic. And today we will share tips on how to vote safely and ensure that your vote counts. Whether you plan to vote by mail or vote in person, our hope is that you will share the ideas that we hear today. All of us must pull together to offer voters the best and safest election experience that is possible under the circumstances. We encourage you to submit questions by using the Q&A button on your screens. There will probably be lots of questions, so we suggest you type yours in as soon as you think about it. We will be monitoring the questions throughout the session and sorting them by common topics. And if we have time, which I believe we will answer the questions that are helpful to everyone at the end of the webinar. We will also provide a link to the Q&As and resources to all the attendees. Our State League's Executive Administrator, Eileen McMurr, will be monitoring the chat and entries. And Karen Kelly will also be there to help you with any technology issues that you have. Just put it in the chat. You may also use the chat for general communication among yourselves, but we please ask that all comments show the utmost respect to all panelists and participants. We also ask that participants limit any partisan remarks. No campaigning, please. We are attempting to get a good recording of the webinar and hope to post it. Before we begin, let's do a quick poll for all the participants. Please enter your answer in the poll. And the question is, what is, Karen, that's one of the polls. We can do it now. What is your plan to vote?
Sorry about that.
That's okay. We could do this one now too. Okay. Just click on one of those and hopefully we will see the results. Thank you, Karen. Does it show us the results? Hey, so 37% say they were planning on voting by mail. 57% are planning on voting in person early, and 6% want to vote on election day. And thankfully, nobody said, I don't know. So everybody has a plan to vote, and I really appreciate it. So what we'll be doing today is hopefully giving you some more information about that you could share with other voters. Karen, you want to go ahead and do the other poll?
I sure will.
Who is on the webinar? So just so we know who we're talking to, are you an individual voter, a representative of an organization, or a member of the league, or someone else? They should be able to answer that really quick. Thank you, Karen. Let's see what the results are. There are 39% who are individual voters, 16% a representative of an organization, and 42% are a member of the league, and 3% are other. So welcome, everybody. We're so happy to have you here. Now, I'm going to introduce our speaker. Christina Adkins is the legal director for the Elections Division of the Texas Secretary of State. In her position with the Texas Secretary of State, Ms. Adkins has served as one of the state's appointed voting systems examiners and has worked extensively with election technology issues, including developing standards and training election officials. She has practiced in both civil and criminal law and has previously worked with the Texas Workforce Commission and as the assistant to the Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts. Ms. Adkins graduated from the University of Texas at Austin, with a degree in English and Mexican American Studies. She received her Juris Doctorate from the Southern Methodist University in 2008. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you for having me today. I'm very, very excited to be here.
Good. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to walk through the voting processes to help folks make their plan to vote safely and ensure that their votes count. Do you want to give us, an overview of the most important efforts the Texas Secretary of State is working on now to ensure voters can safely vote?
Absolutely. And thank you all, everyone, for calling in and participating in the webinar today. I hope that you walk away from this with some good information that you can take back to your organizations or to your friends and neighbors to make them feel more comfortable about the voting process right now in Texas. It is and happy voter registration day, by the way. It is a strange world that we are living in right now with the pandemic, and we've had to adapt and come up with new processes and new ways of doing things in day-to-day life, and that definitely speaks true for the election world as well. There's been a lot of adapting in the election community to make sure that our voters and our workers stay as safe as possible to support our early voting by mail and our early voting in-person experience. For those people that are planning on voting early or planning on voting in person, I strongly recommend that you consider voting early. That's always a good plan, because if there's any problems that arise during the voting process, that gives us time to try to help you resolve those issues and to resolve them when they're happening, so that we're not forced into a provisional ballot roll. We're able to try to get you the right ballot that you need at the time that you are voting. And there's also typically more options available for people that may have recently moved or moved within the county or between counties. You've got more options to make sure that you're able to exercise your right to vote when you vote early than when you do on election day. So that's my first suggestion for everybody, is to really strongly consider the early voting process. Know that when you go into a polling place this time, that it may look a little bit different than what you're used to. We're working hard with our county election offices to make sure that our election workers are adequately prepared with the right personal protective equipment, with masks, with face shields, with hand sanitizer. A lot of the counties are going the extra mile to put up protective like plastic barriers at the check-in station to give people a little bit more distance between the workers and the voters. There might be unique ways of marking your ballot or marking your choices on a voting device, pencils or styluses or gloves. There's lots of things that are going to be a little bit different about the voting process, and just know that all of that is very well thought out, and our counties have put a lot of effort into making sure that everything's been tested and that they're doing their best to keep both you as a voter and our election workers safe and secure.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Karen, why don't you take down the slide for now? There you go. And we're just going to chat back and forth, and what we're going to do is sort of follow the voter and their vote through the process of voting, just so everybody knows what's going on. It'll help me too. I've been working in this for a long time, but I am always ready to learn new things, and there's not a better time than right now to learn all the new techniques that we can use to vote safely. Do you have any recommendations for voters on how to safely register to vote? This is National Voter Registration Day, and to ensure that you're actually on the voter registration rolls.
Absolutely. So the first thing that I would encourage everybody to do is go to votetexas.gov. This is our voter-facing website that has information directed to voters that's provided by the Secretary of State's office. If you go to votetexas.gov and you look in the middle of the page, there's some blue buttons, and there's one right at the top that says, "Am I registered?" That's the first thing that I would recommend that all individuals do, is go through, put your information into Am I Registered to see if in fact you are registered and where you're registered to vote at, particularly if you have moved within the last year and not voted in that interim. We want to make sure that you are registered and that you're registered at the right location. So that's the first thing that I would tell everybody to do, is double check your registration. I periodically check my registration and Am I Registered, just because I'm that kind of person that likes to double check and triple check that kind of stuff. So that's the first thing that I would say to do. If you are currently registered and you need to make an update to your registration, if you have moved within the same county, then you can go to texas.gov and you can make an update to your address or your name through texas.gov. You can handle that part of the process all online. Now, if you've moved between counties from one county to another, you are going to have to take that extra step of submitting a paper registration application. So at votetexas.gov, that we have links to voter registration applications. We've got a principal application that you can print out yourself. And we've got a little wizard there so you can put in your information. Some of it will come out printed out on there, but most importantly, by putting in your specific information, it'll print out an application that's directed to your county election office, so it'll get there much more quickly. Alternatively, if you don't have a printer where you can do that, there's a form on there where you can fill it out and request that our office send you a blank voter registration application. So we will send you a blank voter registration application that you'll need to fill out and mail. It'll come back to our office, but then we turn around and mail those back to the right county. In addition to those two resources that are on our website, there's a lot of other resources that can help you with voter registration. We would say you may want to consider contacting your county election officer directly or going in person to your county election office to fill out a registration application. There's a lot of wonderful voter registration efforts that are going on right now. I know a lot of many league members are involved in this, and so we appreciate all the work that our local organizations and our community is doing to really support each other and getting people updated and getting these registrations in place. Public libraries are also a really great source of voter registration applications. If you've got a public library close to you, they do have applications there and they can take and receive that application. And in addition to that, if you're not in a position where you can get out of your house easily to see some of the other options that are out there, there's a really great website out there called register2vote.org, and it's register with the number 2, but Register2Vote is a remote printing and mailing solution for people that don't have a printer. You can put your information in there, and first it'll check to see if you're registered to vote, so it'll provide that check for you. And then it'll ask you to fill out some information. It'll send you an application that's been pre-printed with some of your information, and then it'll give you an envelope to mail it back in, and that will go directly to your county. So that's another way of getting things to your county a little bit more quickly. So a lot of different great resources out there. Depending on what your situation is, you got to find the one that works best for you.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
It is interesting, and there are a lot of options for people, so thank you for going through that. And we will provide you with those resources in chat, and also in a slide at the end of the webinar. How are the voter registrations numbers going in Texas?
They're going pretty great. I just got the updated numbers just a few minutes before this webinar started. Right now, we're currently at 16.636 million registered voters, which is a record for us. So we're very, very excited about that. The most exciting part to me about that number is that it's only September 22nd, that we still have a few more weeks here to get those registration numbers up. I can tell you that since September 1st of this year, we have added 175,000 new voters to the rolls. And that's, because there's a lot of people that are interested in elections right now, and there's a lot of energized groups out there that are really helping to facilitate that voter registration process. So we're really excited to see what that number ends up being here as we close in on that October 5th date. So keep those efforts up. If you're one of those individuals that's a VDR in your county or helping to get that information out there, please continue to do so. We're very excited to see this number going up so high, and we hope it continues to grow here in the next few weeks.
I know there's a lot of local leagues out there registering voters every place except for right along the coast where they're getting so much rain. Houston has put off their voter registration events until Friday, but the rest of the leagues are all out registering voters in person, and some of them are already having candidate forums. So we're just really proud of their efforts today. So go to their websites, check it out. How about now, we are always very interested in young voters and high school voters. How do you have any information about young voters or high school voters?
Yeah, so we were just looking at those numbers earlier today. It looks like if we just look at the number of voters that are 18 years old on our registration rolls, it looks like we're sitting close to about 348,000 18-year-olds that are currently registered. Now, that doesn't take into consideration new registrations that are coming in. And I'll say this date, this is as of the end of August. It doesn't take into consideration anything that's come in through the month of September. It takes a little bit of time to get that stuff processed, And I know our counties are working hard to get those voter registration applications processed because it's all handled on a county by county basis. In addition to that, we just sent out information for the high school registration program. We provided materials to all of our high school principals to try to help them get their students registered to vote, because they do have a responsibility and an obligation to offer voter registration opportunities to their students. And in light of kind of our current situation and the unique world that we're operating in, we did provide them a list of other resources, other alternatives that they can provide to their students to help them get registered, even if their students are not in person in the classroom, if they're having to work from home. So
that's right. That is fantastic, and we're really glad you did that. And I'm so excited about hopefully the what's it called? The Vote Project.
Project Vote, yes.
Project Vote.
Yes. We have a great thing on our website at Project Vote. It's a curriculum for students and teachers that the teachers can use to incorporate it, into the classroom. There's a big mock election that we do statewide. We've got some activities there, especially kind of in this new world that we're in with so much going on virtually right now. It's a good resource that we hope our teachers can use to kind of supplement some of their own efforts in their classroom to get kids excited and informed about this election. And we appreciate, the League of Women Voters has been a great resource to us in kind of updating some of our materials. And so we're in the process of getting that information updated right now, and it should be posted live to our website here. I'm hoping by the end of the week. And so we can send that out. So yeah.
That is good news. And we hear there's a new license plate that will help educate young voters and help that website. So hopefully it'll be bringing in some money to help pay for that.
I'm really excited. I already ordered my license plate. I need to call and see if it's in so I can get mine on my car here soon. But yes, I definitely, if you're somebody that cares really, is very passionate about voter registration, take a look at that. It's kind of a fun badge to wear on your car, and it'll help, unregistered voters spot you more easily.
Yeah, so. I wanted to pick mine up today and get my picture with it, but the line was too long. Mine is the voter registration one. It says LWVTX. So yay!
Oh,
I'm
nice.
really excited about it. I can't wait to get it on my car. Let's see. And I know there was a big push out with Eric, which you can explain. And then did you notice a bump that went up after that, trying to get the people who are able to be registered but haven't registered to vote? Y'all had a big program where you sent postcards out to people.
That's right. So we recently joined a group called ERIC, and this is an organization. It's a multi-state organization. I think there's 36 other states that are involved in this. Or maybe 30, somewhere right around there. And what it does is it helps us provide, good list maintenance work with our voter registration rolls. We're making sure that people aren't registered in multiple states. We get information from them about, deceased voters to try to make sure that our registration stuff stays as updated as possible. In addition to that, to be a member of ERIC, one of the things that you're required to do is to send out a mailing to everybody that's eligible but unregistered within the state. You have to do that periodically. We just had our first ERIC mailing go out the first week in September. And I think I mentioned before, since September 1, we've seen about 175,000 new voter registrations come through the system. It's hard to know how much of that was a result of the ERIC mailing, because there's so many great efforts going on right now. So many people are doing so much to reach out to unregistered voters. And so we can't attribute it necessarily to ERIC, but we do know that the work that's being done that's out there, and I really think the personal contact that people make, with the voter registration efforts, with the volunteer deputy registrar program, I think that's probably making a huge difference in our numbers going up. So.
Yeah, and the research says that it's like 5 or 7 touches where you try to encourage people to participate in voting is what is needed in order to get people over that hump and into becoming a voter. So postcards, organizations like ours, peer-to-peer, where people talk to each other about voter registration. Now, the next step after voter registration is actually voting. So,
that's right.
So we have a big push about how to vote safely on our website. So one of the first things I'd like to talk to you about is voting by mail. And just go through some of the processes right now, like who can sign up to vote by mail would be a good place to start.
Sure. So we know that there's going to be, an increase in our voter by mail numbers for this election because of the pandemic, because of the influence of COVID-19. A lot of people that may have traditionally been voting in person are now looking at whether or not they're eligible to vote by mail. So in Texas, in order to vote by mail, you do have to meet certain eligibility requirements. There's really, I think, 4 different things that you want to look at. First, if you're going to be away from your county during election day or during early voting, you would be eligible to vote by mail. If you are sick or disabled, and I'll speak more about that here in a moment. If you are 65 years of age or older on election day, you're eligible to vote by mail. So even if your birthday isn't until November 3rd, you're not quite 65 yet, but you will be by November 3rd. You can go ahead now and turn in that application to vote by mail. Or if you're confined in jail but still eligible to vote. So what do I mean by that category? I mean individuals that do not have a final felony conviction, or somebody that may be in jail because of a misdemeanor offense. Those individuals are still eligible to vote and can vote by mail. So a note on the sick or disability category, because I know we get a lot of questions about that. There's been a lot of litigation about this. There's been a lot of concern about COVID-19 and how this impacts these eligibility categories. And I will say, just to kind of clarify a few things there, that when it comes to the sick or disability category, first, the Texas Supreme Court did rule that fear or lack of immunity to COVID-19 does not qualify as a reason to vote by mail. It doesn't fall under that sick or disability category. However, what I would encourage anybody that's concerned or interested in looking at this to do is to look at the definition of disability in the Texas Election Code, and I'm going to read that to you. But disability, that category is for any qualified voter that is eligible to vote by mail if the voter has a sickness or physical condition that prevents the voter from appearing at the polling place on election day without the likelihood of needing assistance or injuring the voter's health. So a lot of that there is based on your perception of sick or disability, about whether or not you feel like you meet that definition. We've talked to a lot of voters that have some underlying medical conditions that, because of COVID-19 puts them at great risk. Individuals that maybe in the past were comfortable but voting in person, but because of the current situation, those underlying medical conditions are of greater concern to them. And so I would say, look at your personal situation and look to see, whether or not you think you meet that definition of disability. If you do, then you mark that application and send that in to the county, and the county will process it. There isn't additional information that you have to provide beyond that. The other thing that I would say is, if you're concerned, what are some of these underlying conditions that I should be concerned about or I should think about? The CDC has some really good information on their website about other conditions that could be impacted by COVID-19, and so that's something I would encourage you to look at there, to look at some of the things that they have, or maybe talk to your own physician or family members about that.
It's really good. And also, if they're going to vote by mail, I really encourage them, if they haven't applied already, to hurry up.
Absolutely.
Get that in there so that you can get the ballot back to you, because there is a little time lag. You have to go through the postal system to get the application turned in, and then you have to get the ballot back to you. So
that's right. And the deadline to submit an application to vote by mail is October 23rd. So there's still quite a bit of time to submit that application, but we would strongly recommend that you do it as soon as possible. The sooner you are, the sooner you're going to get your ballot, the sooner you can get that returned and feel confident that your vote is going to be counted.
And so people who are voting by mail, they often comment to me, they're concerned that their vote isn't going to be counted. So what are some common mistakes that people can avoid?
Great question, Grace. The first thing I would say is to make sure you turn in your application on the early side. Just because you have that long window doesn't mean you should use that long window. Again, the sooner we do things like that, the better position that we're going to be in to help or assist you if there's any issues along the way. So I would say work on that part sooner rather than later. When you are marking your application and filling it out, make sure that you're filling out all the required boxes, that you're indicating your grounds for voting by mail, that you're marking the election for which you want to receive a ballot. If you're using our form, you're going to either want to mark the annual category if you are 65 or older, or voting by mail because of the sick or disability category. Alternatively, you could also mark November election, but you probably want to mark also resulting runoff on there, because if you have some local races that have some runoff elections, you want to make sure you get that ballot. After you submit that application and you get your balloting materials, one of the other things that we hear about being an issue is people properly marking the return envelope. It's called the carrier envelope. That's the one that carries your ballot back to the early voting clerk's office. But people make mistakes on that carrier envelope, and the two things that I would remind voters of there is that first, make sure you're signing it. You do have to sign on across the seal on the outside of that envelope, so make sure that you're signing it. Try to make sure your signature is as legible as possible. In addition to that, if you're not able to sign it, or if you receive assistance in marking or mailing your ballot, which you are by law entitled to be able to, to receive that assistance, there is a portion on there that has to be completed by the person that's assisting you. And we want to make sure that that person assisting you completes that as they're supposed to, that they are marking everything on there and filling out their information, because if it is missing some of that information, that could affect your ballot being counted. So we want to make sure that the assistant does their job too, to make sure that they complete everything that they need to complete.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It is a little tricky, but there is an explanation on there. We also have a real simple video on our website that you can watch, and we'll share that with you so that you could share it with your other friends and family who may need to vote by mail. So I was wondering, now I'm going to look at this question that I'm looking at. So one of the other questions I get often is, what are the different ways that people can turn in their ballot by mail? So you get the ballot, you compare the candidates, you decide who you want to do, you fill it out perfectly. What is it that they're supposed to do?
Yeah, great question. So once you've marked your ballot, once you've filled out the envelope, inserted it in there too, and signed it the way you need to, you got to return it to the county. And so you've got some options for this election. The most common way of returning your mail ballot is by putting it back in the mail. You can rely on the post office to get that back for you, as long as it has the proper postage on there. You can also use common or contract carriers. So UPS, FedEx, things like that. You can use those to return your mail ballot. In addition to that, there is a law that says that mail ballots can be hand delivered by the voter on election day. That is what the general rule is. However, for this election, Governor Abbott actually, using his authority under the disaster declarations that are out there, he has suspended certain provisions in state law to allow hand delivery of your mail ballot at any time now. So it's not just restricted to election day. So that means if you get your mail ballot maybe on the later side and you're concerned about the mail getting it in timely, or maybe you just feel more comfortable walking that ballot in yourself, you do have the ability to hand deliver your mail ballot. There are some parameters to that though. The hand delivery can only occur at the early voting clerk's office. So not at a polling place. If you go to a polling place and you drop off your ballot and you leave, it's not going to be counted. You've got to go to the early voting clerk's office. It can only be the voter that's hand delivering that mail ballot. The voter is going to have to show some ID, and you do have to sign a roster indicating that you've hand delivered it. And part of that is for security purposes, to make sure that we're maintaining chain of custody, that it's properly processed, that we know when the ballot was received, and what election officer took that hand delivery, and it's all there to protect you and to ensure that your ballot travels through the process the way it should. Now, if you have that mail ballot in hand and you're not able to go to the early voting clerk's office, or it's a little late in the game and you're afraid you won't get it mailed back in and it won't get there timely, you can go and vote either in person or on election day. Take that mail ballot with you and you're going to surrender it. You're going to give it back to the worker, and then they'll give you the ability to vote in person. They'll process you as an in-person voter. But make sure you have that ballot in hand. That's the easiest way to do that. If you're not able to return it, not able to get to the early voting clerk's office, but still want to vote, you've got that in-person option available to you first by surrendering that ballot.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's very important that we share this information in as simple way as possible with all the voters, so they understand what they're supposed to do with their ballot, because everybody is so anxious to make sure their vote counts. Can you tell me, how is it that the Secretary of State or counties ensure that each vote by mail ballot is actually counted, and that it is by one of the registered voters?
Sure, yeah, great question. So first and foremost, sometimes there's a lot of myths out there about voting by mail and about provisional voting, about what gets reviewed and what doesn't get reviewed. And when it comes to mail ballots, assuming as long as your ballot is received timely and it's delivered in one of those authorized methods of delivery, so mail, common or contract carrier, or hand delivered by the voter themselves, it will go to the ballot board for review. So the early voting ballot board is a group of workers. These are individuals that are appointed by the county, but they are appointed because the political parties submit lists of eligible individuals that can serve on the ballot board. So there's party parity, there's various party affiliations that are on there. But the ballot board will review each and every ballot that comes in, and will determine, if that person's still a registered voter. They're going to look at signature verification. They're going to compare the signature on your returned ballot on the outside of that carrier envelope to the signature on your application to make sure that those, match, that it could be the same person. And they're going to then process the mail ballot from there. So we have this group of workers that's appointed, and their primary job is to review mail ballots and provisional ballots to go through that verification process. So that part of the process is there. If for some reason your mail ballot is not going to be counted, you will get a written notice from the ballot board telling you that your mail ballot's not going to be counted, and it will identify the reason. So you will have some resolution on that. When the ballot board meets to review ballots, and this is something that's going to be happening on a running basis throughout the early voting period, there's designated times upon which they can meet, but it typically happens multiple times, particularly when there's a high volume of mail ballots. Candidates and political parties are entitled to have poll watchers present. So I know that there are typically quite a few poll watchers that are there on behalf of the candidates and parties to observe the process, to make sure that they're not seeing anything happen that they think is questionable or inappropriate. And believe me, when they see things that they are unsure about, they will call our office and they will talk to us about what they see, so that we can help advise the ballot boards and advise the counties on that process. In addition to that, I want to make sure that you all know that those ballots are secured from the time that they're received to the time that they're transferred to the ballot board, to the time they're transferred back to the early voting clerk, who's our custodian of our records. There are chain of custody, steps that have to go through. There are verifications that have to be done anytime there's a handoff of ballots. So they are secured and tracked throughout that whole process.
Okay, thank you very much. So we really want people to know that their votes are safe once they arrive. Howard County, so now we're going to change over and talk about people. We encourage everybody to vote, whether they want to vote by mail, we'll encourage that. If they want to vote early in person, we'll encourage that. If they want to vote on election day, we're very encouraging of that. So tell me I would like to talk to some about voting early in person. Mm-hmm. How are counties doing with getting their voting locations? Because of COVID, so many places that used to be available for voting locations aren't there anymore. So are there sufficient voting locations and sufficient election workers? What's going on with that?
Yeah, great question. So in talking to our counties, they've had to get creative here with respect to polling locations for a number of reasons. Some of the buildings that they previously used are not making themselves available out of COVID concern. But in addition to that, a lot of counties are looking at what they can do to expand the voting space so that there's more space between voters, more areas for people to wait. And so they're looking at bigger locations. And so it's very possible for this election that your polling places that you're familiar with may not be the polling places that are in use for this election for all of these different reasons. So I would say that when you go to vote earlier, even on election day, it's very important that you don't just assume that the place that you used last time is still going to be the place that you're using this time. You can go to the Secretary of State's website. On votetexas.gov, on that main website, right on the front page, there's a link there where you can click Find My Polling Place. You can put in your information and it'll tell you the list of early voting and election day locations that are available to you. In addition to that, all of our counties have that information on their county websites. Some of our larger counties have some really great tools that'll even show you the wait times at the different locations. So I would very much encourage you to look up and verify whatever location you're wanting to vote at before you go vote. I would also suggest that you have a backup location. If the lines prove to be very long in one location and you're concerned about the social distancing aspect or just time it's going to take to wait in line, know what your alternatives are. If you don't have an alternative in place, you can always ask the election workers, and they should be able to direct you to other locations that are close by. So that's one thing that you want to look at. When it comes to election workers, I can just say we can never use enough workers in Texas. There are never enough. We always want volunteers. I want to say thank you to the League of Women Voters, because from what I'm hearing from our counties is they have been getting an overwhelming response of volunteers, and we know that you all have been very aggressively pursuing this and encouraging people to consider working as the elections and the polls, and thank you for that, because it's paying off. The counties have reported, definitely a heightened interest in working this election, whereas they were very concerned in the past about not having enough workers over concerns of COVID. That being said, if you're interested and you haven't talked to your county, please do so, because they can always use more workers, and we really are suggesting all of our counties, in addition to having solidly staffed polling locations, to have backup workers. We want them to have backup workers in place just in case, some situations change with respect to the workers that they're planning on using. So please consider volunteering if you haven't already, or encourage those of you all, those friends and neighbors, or family members that you have that might be in a good position to work this election, to consider working this election.
Yeah, it's very exciting, because we're getting a whole new batch of poll workers who will be trained up and able to help out during all these elections. So I'm excited about all those new poll workers. I want to remind everybody that when you do go vote, remember those people are getting paid something, but they're working there because to support the democracy in their community. Mm-hmm. I want everybody to be sure and thank the poll workers and give them a high five, except for while social distancing, because it's such an important job, and we're just so thankful for them to be there. And it's long hours, so we're really grateful to them. Please encourage everybody to continue signing up and get trained to become a poll worker. So those are good news. Yes, we've heard some different places are showing up as polling locations, and it'll be interesting. Do all the polling locations also offer curbside voting?
Yes, yes. Curbside voting is required by law at every early voting and election day polling place. So if you are somebody that is unable to enter the polling location, for whatever your individual reason is, related to curbside voting, then you do have that option to have them bring the voting materials out to you in your car. My suggestion for people that want to exercise their right to curbside vote is, go on your county website and see if they have information about curbside voting, or call your county office to figure out how you need to alert the workers in your location that you're going to be voting curbside. Also, just want to ask people to think, make sure that you're reserving that option for when you really need it, because the more people that show up to curbside vote that could vote in person, the longer the lines are going to be for some of those people that really truly need curbside voting. So think carefully about whether or not you're somebody that truly needs it, or whether or not you're able to go in the polling place. But that said, if you believe that you need it, use it. That is there for you to use. It is an option that's available to you. One other thing I wanted to mention, that it's kind of attached to curbside voting, but also just polling locations and workers. It's really, really important that we try to keep our workers and our voters as safe as possible. We've had a lot of questions in our office about mask wearing, about what's required, who's required to wear masks when they enter the polling location. I can tell you that across the board, I haven't spoke to any counties that are saying they're not requiring it of their workers. Most counties are requiring that because they are in an employer-employee relationship with their workers, so they are asking their workers to wear masks. In fact, the state of Texas has provided cloth masks and face shields for workers all across the state. We were able to work with the Texas Division of Emergency Management to secure these free of charge at no cost, to the counties, to help them make sure that they've got adequate supplies for their workers. In addition to that, Anheuser-Busch is donating hand sanitizer nationwide for all of our elections. We're actually getting delivery of that hand sanitizer here in the next week or so. So if you have hand sanitizer in the polling place, that is thanks to the efforts of Anheuser-Busch donating that to us. But beyond that, beyond the protections that we're trying to put in place for workers, if a voter shows up and doesn't have a mask, they will not be required to wear a mask. We strongly strongly encourage it. But if somebody's unwilling or unable to, because we know that due to some medical conditions, there are some individuals that maybe not be able to physically wear a mask, they will not be turned away. And so that's just an important thing to note, that, you know, we're not going to turn away a voter for something, you know, such as not showing up to wear a mask. But that makes it even more important for everybody else to do so. You know, because there are individuals that may choose not to or may be unable to, it's even more important that everybody else that is able to, willing and able to do so. And that's to protect the, you know, yourself, to protect the other voters in the polling location, and more importantly, to protect the health and safety of the workers that are going to be there all day, you know, giving their time. And so that's something we hope everybody strongly considers and takes action on.
I think that's great, and we of course really want everybody to wear a mask, but we know that some people consider it, beyond a health reason, some people consider it a political statement. So, speaking of political statements, what can people wear or not wear when they go in to vote early?
Also a great question. Another one that we've been hearing a lot about in our office, that there, you know, is a little bit of confusion sometimes about what constitutes what we call electioneering, and what you can wear in a polling location. There was a decision 2 years ago out of Minnesota. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled on a Minnesota law related to electioneering and actually struck down their law because it was a little bit too vague. Texas is not like that. Our law was actually praised as being something that was more specific and more well-defined. So in Texas, you cannot electioneer for or against a candidate, measure, or party. And so that means that you can't be distributing paperwork inside the electioneering zone. You can't be wearing t-shirts or hats or masks that advocate for or against a candidate, measure, or party. If you're wearing something and it doesn't advocate for a candidate, measure, or party, if it's something that's maybe an issue that's out there but not on the ballot, not related to a candidate, but you know, could be perceived as something that looks a little bit more political, that is okay, as long as it's not advocating for a candidate, measure, or party. You know, our law is very specific, and so there is a little bit more wiggle room. I think sometimes our election judges, in their strong desire to make sure that polling locations, you know, are as free of undue influence, you know, to voters, sometimes maybe go a little bit further on that, and maybe get a little bit stricter than they should sometimes with the electioneering stuff. If you're wearing something and you're concerned that they're not letting you into the polling place, or they're asking you to change your attire, and you're concerned that that's not right, then call our office and we'll help you get that resolved.
To be clear, the voter's guide, the printed voter's guide, or a list of your candidates, or a sample ballot with your marks on it,
totally okay.
All okay for you as an individual to take into the to polling place when you go vote.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. In fact, we would encourage you to take your own notes with you. It's going to be a really long ballot this year with a lot of information. So it is okay. I take my own notes all the time into the polling location when it's a long ballot, just to help me get through the process much more quickly. What I'm talking about with electioneering is you can't have somebody in line passing out flyers for a candidate or advocating for a political party. But you as a voter can take your own notes in with you, voter guides or whatever.
Whatever you want to take. So that would be great. So that's what let's see. It sounds like we're doing everything. Election workers, where and when to vote. We went through that, what to bring, what not to bring. Now, I just want to remind everybody that although you can bring in a list, a paper list, or a voter's guide with you, your list of candidates, you cannot open your phone in the voter booth.
That's correct.
You can bring it in, but you cannot open it or use it. So make sure you tell all your friends not to do that, and make sure they have their list of candidates of who they're going to vote for in their hand or written down, or a sample ballot. You could get your sample ballots off the county website. So I would think.
And also, no ballot selfies. No pictures of yourself in the voting station. No ballot selfies.
No, after you get your voting sticker, then go outside, take your selfie with your camera, and post it to all your friends and family and say, woohoo, now it's your turn to go vote. I voted, now it's your turn to go vote.
That's right.
So all right, so we're still going over a few more things. So if you are in a county that has voting machines, what is it you need to avoid? What mistakes do people make sometimes?
Yeah, great question. So there's really two things here that I would think about. One, you need to know what kind of system that you're voting on. So if you're a county that uses what we call DREs, or direct recording electronic voting devices, those are the ones that have no paper component to it. You're marking your votes on the screen and you're casting your ballot on the screen. So in that situation, it's really important that you get all the way to the end and that you actually cast your ballot, that you hit the button at the end that indicates that your ballot has been cast and that your voting session is ended. And the different equipment that's out there will have different ways of signaling that. If you've got a question about that, ask your worker, what should I see on the last screen to know that I've finished voting, that my ballot has been cast? That's a very important thing to do there. Alternatively, and this is the one that I think more and more people are going to be faced with this year, because so many counties have transitioned to paper-based systems in the last few years. What is it that, how do you know that your ballot has been cast when it's a paper-based system? So a lot of our systems now, and particularly only in our larger counties, have a component where you're marking your ballot selection on a screen, and then it provides to you a paper printout of your votes. Now, at that point, you still have not cast your ballot. You've got to take that paper list of your votes, that's your actual ballot, and you have to deposit it into another device, a precinct scanner, or in some locations, it'll just be a ballot box in order for your vote to count. There are no systems in Texas that have any kind of receipt that you print out and take with you that'll have a list of your vote selections on there. So if you're walking out of the polling place and it's got a list of how you voted on there, then you're probably walking out with your ballot. So turn around and go back. We don't have any kind of receipts that will show a summary of how you vote. So anything that has votes on there, you got to make sure you're depositing that either in the scanner or the ballot box before you leave the polling location. And again, if you've got questions, ask your workers about what you need to do. You know, how do I know what's the last step in the process? That's a good question to ask them. What's the last thing that I need to do to make sure that my vote's been cast? And they'll help you through that process.
All right, I really appreciate it. And we're still doing pretty well on time. Let me look at the list. Okay, I think every once in a while, like during the last election, my brother called me up, and he had just moved, and but he hadn't updated his registration because it happened sort of towards the end, and he asked me what he could do because he really wanted to vote, and I told him about voting a limited ballot. And so, who would a limited ballot be for?
Yeah, wonderful question. So if you are somebody that's moved recently from one county to another, so this is going from one county to another county. If you're within the same county, you're okay. But one county to another, maybe, you know, Dallas to Tarrant or Travis to Williamson, or even across the state. If it's during early voting, you can go to your early voting clerk's office and they'll give you what's called a limited ballot. And that's a ballot that will have all of the races that are in common between your two counties. So typically you're going to see statewide races, some federal offices, and then occasionally some district offices, depending on if it's a really close county. So if you or somebody you know is in that situation, go during early voting to your early voting clerk's office, ask for a limited ballot. And I know for this election, everyone's very concerned about the presidential race, or maybe the U.S. Senate race. Those will definitely be on everybody's ballot statewide. So that's the thing that's in common that you'll make sure that you get to vote on. There could be some other races that, depending on from what county what counties you're moving between, that you might get to vote on as well. But that limited ballot is a great option for people, but it can only be done during early voting and only at the early voting clerk's office.
Not on election day.
That's right.
To do it on election day is not going to happen. And
That's right.
then just a real quick note of provisional ballots. Some people are left, something happens, and they have to vote a provisional. They're offered a provisional ballot. Tell me about that.
Absolutely. If you're offered a provisional ballot, do it. Don't not do it. There's a common myth out there about provisional votes that those aren't counted unless it's a really close election, and that is just not true. If for some reason you're not showing up on the voter registration list, maybe you did recently move and you believe you updated your registration. Maybe you made an update through DPS, and for some reason that information just didn't get transferred to the county. Do do that provisional ballot, because what happens is it does two things. One, it gives the voter registrar a little bit of time to research your voter registration situation to try to figure out why you're not on the list of registered voters and if you should be there. Secondly, it serves as a voter registration document, so it'll update your voter registration for next time so that you're not faced with this problem when you vote in the next election. And then all provisional ballots are reviewed. Every single one of them is reviewed. If it's before election day or on election day, many counties even take care of it by election day. Counties do have a little bit of extra time, a few days after election day, to handle the provisional ballot process. But they're all reviewed, and anything that is eligible for counting will get counted. So it's not something where they hold those to wait and see if it's a close election. It's a situation where if you are eligible, your vote will count.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, because we're always encouraging people to vote no matter what, as if they're eligible. So this is the very first election without straight party voting. What does that mean to voters?
Great point. I'm so glad you brought that up. Yes, so when you go to vote, your ballot's going to look a little bit different this time. If you're somebody that's traditionally relied on that straight party box to help you mark your candidates, you do not have that option this time. This is our first election in Texas without straight party voting. It was from a law change in 2017. And so that means you're going to have to go race by race to mark all of your selections. And so that means it's going to take a little bit more time in the polling location. So be prepared to spend a little bit more time at the voting booth when you're voting. This goes back to the sample ballot thing or the notes. Strongly encourage that you consider bringing that with you, that you review the candidates ahead of time, because that'll help you get through the process a little bit more quickly. A lot of people have asked me what my thoughts are about the lack of straight party voting, if we think it's going to affect people, finishing out the ballot. I'm actually really optimistic that this is going to, ensure that more races, at the bottom of the ballot get voted on, because a lot of local races, our cities, our school districts, our water districts, they don't have party affiliation. And so some people that rely on straight party voting, would just hit that one punch at the top and not look at the local races. So I'm hoping that this means that more people are getting all the way through the ballot. It's going to be a very long ballot this year because of the no straight party voting. But in addition to that, because there were a lot of entities that postponed their elections from May to November because of the pandemic. So just be prepared to spend a little bit more time in that voting booth. So to speed up the time there, do your research ahead of time so that you know what you're going to be seeing when you get to the polling place.
And bring your list of candidates.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's see. I'm looking at my leftover questions. I just want to make sure that people know that, I'll get to questions in just a second, that people know that we're not going to find out right that same night like we have in the past. It's going to take longer, and I want people to expect that and know, why is that happening?
Sure. We noticed this trend in 2018. If you go back and look at the 2018 results in Texas, and you look at the number of results, for example, the big Senate race that occurred in 2018, and you look at the number of votes from election night till the final canvass vote totals, there was, a difference between those numbers. On election night, it's really important that we all remember that those are unofficial results. Unofficial. Those are all the votes and the ballots that have been counted through election night. Now, in Texas, we've got mail ballots that can come in after the fact. If you're voting by mail and you're domestic within the United States, not military, you have until the next business day to get your mail ballot in. For our military and overseas voters, though, they have until the 5th or 6th day, depending on their circumstance, to get their mail ballot in. So we do know, because more people are voting by mail and because there are these extended deadlines for mail ballots, that not everything is going to be in or counted on election night. So it's really important that we understand that things could change from election night until the time the votes are canvassed. And the canvass is when the votes are made official. When all of those late arriving mail ballots are able to be counted, any outstanding provisional ballots that need to be reviewed can be counted. All of those are in that final canvass number. And so that's what we have to look at. And just know, particularly depending on the high volume of mail ballots and how many people get their mail ballots in ahead of time, there could be a big difference between election night and the canvass total. So be prepared for that, and know that on election night. They're unofficial. They're not official until they're canvassed later.
And many times it's very close. So everybody go out and make sure that you vote, and make sure that you encourage your friends and family to vote, and that your coworkers, to vote in this election. It's a really important election because it's not only the president, but all the way down. I'm going to go ahead and see if you have just a few extra minutes.
Of course. My time is yours, Grace.
Okay. Dorothy, do you have some thoughts on what questions that came from the participants today that you might like to ask? Christina?
Sure. I mean, there was a broad range of questions. One was on a clarification on where's the voting clerk's office. Are there satellite branches, or is it one central location?
Great question. So we're talking about people that want to hand deliver their mail ballots. So that's going to vary county by county. If you have an elections administrator in your county, that typically means you're going to have one early voting clerk's office. If you have a county clerk that runs elections, there are a handful of counties that have branch offices or annexes. You know, their county clerk office might have multiple branch locations. There's 3 counties I can think of off the top of my head that are like that. Travis County, Harris County, and I believe Galveston County has annex locations too, because they're run by the county clerk. In those counties have the option of accepting mail ballots at some of those branch locations. And that's something you're going to want to check directly with your county on to make sure that you know where to go to drop off your ballot.
Great. Is there a way for voters to verify that their mail ballot was received and processed?
Sure, great question. So some of our counties have some, we'll have a tracker on their website. Some of the vendors have provided this where you can go in and track your mail ballot to see where it is in the process. We do not have something like that statewide. That's something we're looking at long-term implementation, but we were not able to do in such a short time frame for this election. You are always welcome to call your county and ask them where your mail ballot is in the process. You can ask them if your application's been received, if your ballot's been sent to the ballot board. But remember, if your ballot's not counted, if it's rejected for any reason, you will get something in the mail notifying you this. So you will get something that tells you, of the rejection and the reason for rejection. So you can also just wait and see, if you get something like that.
And that's one of the reasons to do this early, because if you
Absolutely.
got that notification before Election Day, then you would have the option to what?
No, actually, if you get that notification before Election Day, there really aren't a whole lot of alternatives available to you to go back and vote in person. Now, if you think there was a mistake, if you think that the ballot board, misread your signature issues, then our suggestion is to contact the county clerk, the early voting clerk, because the early voting clerk does have some options. There are some remedies under the law where they can go to court to get something reevaluated, or if they think that the ballot board has made a mistake, they can redo that. And some counties have done that in the past. So if you do get a letter like that and you think it was improper, don't just go try to vote in person at the polling place. Contact your early voting clerk and work with them on figuring out what remedies are available to you.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want one more?
Yeah, one more.
Okay. Thankfully, no weapons are allowed in the polling location. Does that law include the parking lot? I'm concerned that right to carry advocates might try to display their rights.
So there was actually, it's interesting. So there is actually a state law that prohibits weapons in polling places, right? So that does exist. There was actually an attorney general opinion a few years ago that actually said that presiding judges in certain locations do actually have the ability, if they have a handgun license, to carry within the polling place if necessary. We've got an advisory on our website that addresses that. I don't believe that extends to the polling place or to the parking lot. I can double check that, but I think it's actually just the entrance of the polling location is what it says there. And I know a lot of entities have opted to put signs up to reinforce that notion, because it doesn't matter if you have a handgun license or not, you cannot carry in a polling place. That the laws are different in that location. I'll go back and look and see what the law says, what the actual language is with respect to parking lots, but I don't believe that it includes parking lots. So I think somebody could have something in a parking lot, just can't go into the polling location.
Thank you. Grace, I think we're at our limit.
Okay. Oh man, I was learning so much.
Can I add one thing?
Thank you so much, Christina. I really, yes.
Yeah, just one thing. I saw a couple of questions just kind of out of the corner of my eye about individuals that were in prison or had been in prison, about them being eligible to vote. And I just wanted to, there's some misinformation out there about that particular issue because there's some litigation in other states on that. And I just wanted to clarify that if an individual is eligible for registration, if they have completed the terms of their sentence, if they had a felony conviction but completed it. So if they're off paper or they're no longer in jail, then they can just register to vote again. There isn't any additional steps that they need to go through. They just fill out that application and send that in. But they do need to make sure that they're off paper, not on probation, not on parole, and out of prison. But I know we've had a lot of questions about that recently because of litigation going on in other states. And so I saw that question. I just wanted to clarify that.
I think that's really important. It's one of the things we train our volunteer deputy registrars to say to people if that comes up. Are you off paper? Because most of the time, those folks will know what the answer is, and they will know not to do that if we ask them that question. So thank you for clarifying that. All right, let's see. Thank you so much, Christina. I really appreciate your time. It's a very busy time of the year. It's busy for us, and I know it's super duper busy for you guys and the county election workers too. Karen, would you please put up the slide with the voting dates? Can you find that slide? Or do you want me to do it? Are you there? I'm going to share my screen. Karen? Okay, I'm going to share my screen.
Yes, share your screen. Sorry, my unmute didn't work.
Okay, let's see. I'm going to go here. I'm going to share, and you're obviously not looking at the right thing. I'm going to go here, see if it shows up. Boop. I always make noises when I do that. Present, see what it goes to. All right, I just wanted to share one last time so everybody can see the election deadlines, and we will provide this information to you after the webinar. Let's see if I could make it go to the next one. So we want to encourage everybody to make their plan to vote and plan to vote early. Because it is the first election without straight party voting. And we want everybody to come prepared to the polls. We want them to to compare their candidates, decide who they're going to vote for. One of the best resources that we provide is called vote411.org, and it's a nonpartisan voters guide. We asked questions that are pertinent to that elected office, and those candidates actually input the information themselves, and we don't change anything. So if something is grammatically not correct or there's a misspelling, it is totally the candidate. We don't change anything. And we, right now, all the state elections are up, and more local elections will be up if you happen to have a league in your community. So that'll be up soon. Right now they're in English, and it'll be up in Spanish pretty soon. In Houston, I hear they're doing some more languages, so we're really excited about that. If you need information from the league, we have a lot of good, simply written, simplified information at votetexas.gov. Of course, votetexas.gov is the Texas Secretary of State's website. They also have a telephone number you could call if there's an issue or you had or concern. Register2vote.org is that website we were letting you know about, where you don't have to have an envelope stamp or a printer. So it's a useful tool the Secretary of State and the League of Women Voters has been sharing for those folks who need that. But we want everybody to hurry up. Please look up your county election website. Make sure that you know where it is, what it looks like, and that it's providing you the information. I would encourage you to download the sample ballot and print it up if you have a printer, or at least use that sample ballot to write down who you plan to vote for. We often will refer people to election protection, and it's actually called texasvoterprotection.org. So if you have any issues or questions during early voting on our election day, you could either call the Secretary of State's phone number, or you could go to texasvoterprotection.org, or give me a call if there's an issue, and we'll try to help you out with that. So thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. We are going to have another webinar on, I believe it's October the 6th, where we will be talking to people about what each elected official does, all the way down from, well, we probably won't do the president, so everybody kind of knows that. So we're probably going to start with state elected officials, county elected officials, and officials that would be at the municipal level. So it is going to be fun. We'll learn a lot more. Who knew that the railroad commissioner is actually about oil and gas? Stay tuned. I'll see you on October the 6th. Thank you so much, Christina. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you.